In this video, I will talk about the finest 18-55mm kit lens for Canon's crop sensor DSLRs. By the end of this clip, I will also explain my reasoning behind this claim. Let's begin. I'm talking about the Canon EF-S 18-55mm f3.5 to 5.6 IS STM lens, and we'll explore 12 key features about it, ranging from physical aspects to image quality tests. I had a great time testing this lens. It focuses quickly and it's very versatile. In just 2 hours, due to its convenience, I took a lot of photos. I'll showcase more images in the upcoming minutes. Meanwhile, as this is a lens review, let's break down the 12 aspects. Firstly, build quality. I've always been fond of how this kit lens looks. It's aesthetically pleasing and doesn't appear cheap. That is, until you handle it. Upon doing so, while rotating the zoom ring, you may encounter some resistance. It doesn't glide smoothly like more expensive lenses. Nonetheless, this isn't the worst zooming experience I've encountered. There are 2 well-placed switches on the side, one for auto and manual focusing and another to toggle image stabilization on or off. On the back, there's a plastic mount. The entire lens is covered in plastic. The only upside to this is that it makes the lens somewhat lighter. Of course, it doesn't have weather sealing. The focusing ring, unlike the zoom ring, turns smoothly. Although the lens feels rather cheap, I think it's visually appealing for a kit lens. Now, let's move to compatible cameras. Upon examining the front of the lens, we can see the EF-S letters in the full name, indicating that our 18-55mm lens was designed to work with Canon's crop sensor DSLRs like my Canon 80D. Of course, with an adapter, it can also be used on mirrorless cameras as long as those cameras also have a crop sensor. Let's talk about the focal length. One of the major advantages of this lens is versatility. It offers a wide angle as well as a generous zoom. In full-frame terms, the lens ranges from 29 to 88mm. This flexible focal length makes it an excellent starter lens for beginners who wish to learn photography and explore the outdoors. Even experienced photographers might appreciate this kit lens for a casual photo walk. With its 18-55mm lens, it's perfectly suited for landscapes and street photography, and if you're into vlogging, this could be a good choice. 18mm is a focal length suitable for filming yourself handheld. Now let's shift our focus to size and weight. Observing the lens size, it is the smallest at 28mm, adding 7.5 cm to the camera's length. It extends nearly 1 cm when we zoom in. The lens weighs 205 grams, which is 50 grams more than the 18-55mm version without image stabilization. However, this is not much to complain about. It is small and lightweight. Now, let's discuss about the aperture. The lens specifications indicate that it has 7 aperture blades, whereas the non-IS version had only 6. Later, we will see how the bokeh looks like. Now, let me illustrate the minimum aperture values. f3.5 remains open slightly from 18 to 24mm, f4.5 ranges from 28 to 37mm, and f5.6 begins at 50mm. Thus, there are quite a few changes across that zoom range. The lens doesn't let in a lot of light. The maximum aperture values are as follows: f22 at 18mm, closing all the way to f36 at 55mm. These are the maximum values. Let's test the focusing. As evident, the lens focuses quickly in live view mode, no issues at 18mm. However, when zoomed in fully at 55mm, it tends to focus hunt slightly. It's worth mentioning that I was testing this lens to its limits, as the tree on the right is extremely close. Now, let me share something nice. When using the viewfinder, the STM motor performs exceptionally well. It focuses quickly without hunting even at 55mm. Thanks to the STM focusing motor, the performance of this lens, first released in 2013, is great. It truly impressed me. It also focuses in complete silence. Another notable feature is image stabilization. I filmed an Olympus camera using the kit lens to demonstrate this feature. The stabilization performance is average. Canon's 18-135mm lens outperforms it, but still, it has stabilization, so photographers and videographers will appreciate it. Let's now go through 5 image quality tests. We're gonna see if this lens outperforms the other 18-55mm kit lenses. Let's begin with sharpness. At 18mm f3.5, we see decent sharpness in the middle of the image, average contrast, and some purple color fringing. If we stop down to f5.6, the image center looks excellent. Let's switch back to f3.5 and examine the corner. The sharpness is decent, but there is noticeable magenta and green color fringing on contrasting edges. Sharpness improves slightly at f4 and significantly at f5.6. At f8, we still see chromatic aberrations, but the sharpness is very good. Halfway zoomed in at 35mm, the minimum aperture is f4.5. The center of the image looks good, and chromatic aberrations are nearly gone. The corners are a bit softer, but with less chromatic aberrations. They appear sharper if we stop down to f5.6 and deliver good results at f8. At 55mm, where we have f5.6, the image center is a bit softer. The corners have decent sharpness with low levels of chromatic aberrations. If we stop down to f8, we see an improvement. The lens struggles a bit with chromatic aberrations, but these can be easily removed in Photoshop. In terms of sharpness, the lens offers performances that I would classify as above average. Now let's move to distortion and vignetting. At 18mm, we notice significant battle distortion, which is not something that we want. Also, at f3.5, the corners are quite dark, but they improve significantly at f5.6. At 35mm, we have good news. There is no distortion and vignetting is less pronounced. Stopping down to f5.6 enhances the image. At 55mm, the lines are straight, and vignetting is acceptable, improving further at f8. The lens performs decently when it comes to distortions. Vignetting isn't great, but turning on the in-camera peripheral illumination correction will brighten up the corners. Now let's evaluate close-up image quality. We are at 55 cm and at the minimum focusing distance from the subject 25 cm. At f5.6, the image lacks contrast and is not very sharp. However, stopping down to f8 yields excellent results. Now let's examine the performance in bright light. One aspect that I appreciate here is the well-maintained contrast levels. We observe some flaring, but overall this is not a disappointing result. Lastly, let's examine the bokeh. Here's what happens in close-ups. Good bokeh even at 18mm, and upon zooming in fully, we get a pleasing result at f5.6, a nicely blurred background. At normal distances, keep in mind that this is a kit lens, so don't expect excellent results with the small apertures. We still get some blur at 18mm and a decent result at 55mm, but if we stay relatively close to the subject, the results can be quite pleasing. In conclusion, this lens might feel cheap because, like its predecessors, it's entirely covered in plastic, but it delivers decent performances. As mentioned, this is the best 18 to 55mm kit lens for Canon's crop sensor DSLRs. This is my opinion. Now let me explain why I say this. When it comes to image quality, the three versions Canon released have approximately similar performances and same build quality, so the decision largely depends on the focusing motor and image stabilizer. The first version lacks a fast, quiet STM focusing motor and doesn't have image stabilization. The second one has image stabilization but lacks the STM motor. Our lens possesses both IS and STM, and that's why it's the top 18 to 55mm kit lens for Canon's crop sensor DSLRs. As you've seen, it focuses fast and it stabilizes your footage. It's a neat, inexpensive lens. Please share your thoughts in the comment section about it. What's your opinion about the 18 to 55mm IS STM? If you enjoyed this video, press that like button and see you in the next video.